Go ahead and get started so that our presenters have the full time. For your information, this session is being recorded and will be captioned and uploaded to the ETE YouTube channel. And so our presenters for this session are Kraus and Stacy Bevan. They are both in the Department of Nutrition, Dietetics, and Food Science, and they're going to talk to us today about course design to support students becoming learners.
Thank you very much. So as she said, I'm Katie and this is Stacy. We were just joking about how we are not the tallest people on this campus and these tall podiums really highlight that. But we're excited to talk to you today about how we can support students becoming learners. So we'll talk about students' roles as learners, and we'll really emphasize on how we can help students build relationships with us, with their peers, with other professionals. And then this is a workshop, so we will have time towards the end of our time that we'll all work together to brainstorm and share ideas for ways that we can support students in becoming learners. So many of you are probably familiar with this book. Give me a raise of hands if you're familiar with the book Becoming a Learner by Matt Sanders. So this book is used as the required text for the Connections course, which is the freshman orientation course. And it's a really great book. I feel like reading it as a faculty member helped me think about my own learning and think about my students' learning. It does a great job of helping the reader think about the process of learning, and for college students, really thinking about how they can maximize their college experience to prepare them for their future. And so in this book, they're really learning a lot about principles of learning, and in Connections, they get a deep dive into those principles. But ideally, we don't want the process of becoming a learner to stop with freshman orientation. So we're hoping that today you'll leave with some more tools in your toolbox, and as was highlighted in the keynote speaker, some of the tools might be for you, some of them might not be, but hopefully it'll get you thinking about ways that you can support students becoming a learner throughout their college career.
Okay, thanks, Katie. All right, so I'm going to talk about the student's role of becoming a learner. And the main takeaway of this book by Matt Sanders is that college is not to gain a very specific set of professional skills, but rather college is to become a learner. And that really is a mindset shift for a lot of students, because if we think about the conversation students have, and we're talking about you're going to college, and they're like, yeah, I just got to hurry and get through college so I can get a job, so I can get better pay, so I can start real life. And they're not really thinking about what Matt Sanders says is kind of really the overall takeaway of college is to really have this transition to become a more capable person, a contributing citizen, someone that has increased in character, communication skills, more creative. And so as educators, again, we can help students understand their role as learners. He points out really 3 reasons why just gaining these professional skills in college is not enough, and why becoming a learner is so important. And those are, your degree doesn't guarantee you a good job, and I can attest to that. When I graduated with my bachelor's, it was a recession. The field I went to was pretty saturated in Cache Valley, so I took a lot of little part-time jobs, and the pay wasn't what I expected when I graduated, and so it doesn't always guarantee that for you. You are going to forget much of what you learn in college, and I'm sure all of us can think of classes that we hardly remember anything from, but we wish we could, right? And then many jobs that we learn in college, or many job skills that we learn in college, will become obsolete. And we already see shifts in the job market with advanced technology, artificial intelligence, and we're going to continue to see some of those shifts. So what do employers really want? Well, a lot of times students think it's those job-specific skills, but in a study conducted in 2020 by the Association of American Colleges and Universities, they surveyed about 500 executives and hiring managers, and from US companies that were various sizes and different types of companies, and they asked them what they really wanted from their employers. And you can see on the top things that they listed, it's not a lot of those specific professional skills. Of course, they want their employees to have those, but it's a lot of these softer skills, like being able to work in teams, being able to critically think, that they can analyze and interpret the data that they have, that they can apply their knowledge to real-world situations. And so, again, we're trying to have students become something, and it's not just to get that A or the high grade point average or get the degree, but they should be changing from their time here in college. So Matt Sanders, he says it's really important for students that are coming to college and their parents, if their parents are paying for their college, to understand what they are purchasing when they come to college. We can't hand them education. We can't spoon feed it to them and say, you have to learn this. We can't hand them a degree. But what they're purchasing when they're paying their tuition, for their textbooks, their course fees, is they're paying for access and opportunity. And he compares this to a membership at a gym. And I think all of us could agree, if this was the case, if we joined a gym, that we automatically lost the few pounds that we wanted to, that we were physically fit, we could run a marathon with ease the second we joined that gym, we'd all be joining a gym, right? But when we join a gym membership, we are paying for access to the equipment, we're paying for access to people that can help us reach our goals if, and we really emphasize if, they're willing to do their part. And so it's the same with education and learning. When students are paying to come to college, they need to understand that they're paying for that access and opportunity, but it's going to require hard work, it's going to require time, energy, and what they're willing to put in, that's what they're going to get out. It's an investment. As I was reading about this analogy between the gym membership and education, it really reminded me of something that I teach in a class called Maternal and Child Nutrition, which is the division of responsibility of child feeding, which seems like far reach, but go with me here for a second. So in this division of responsibility, this was developed by Ellen Satter, and she is a family therapist, a nutritionist, she was a dietitian, and she's really the leading authority on child feeding. And so this division, it gives the parent and the child a role. So the parent is responsible for what the child will be offered, when it will be offered, and where it is offered. And then the child is responsible for how much they will eat and whether or not they choose to eat. And really the kind of goal of this division of responsibility is that it should reduce the likelihood of mealtime battles, parents trying to force feed their children and children refusing, right? So a little less picky eating, and also promotes intuitive eating of the child. So they're more aware of their hunger and fullness cues, and they're going to eat what they need to. So parents will know, many of you might be parents, you'll know that at one meal they'll eat a lot, and other meals they'll eat nothing, and you're like, are they going to starve? But then miraculously the next meal they make up for it, right? So the parents have to trust that the child is going to do their job, and they have to let go and trust that the child will eat when it needs to eat and not when they don't need to eat. And so again, if there's still issues with this, then you might see a professional outside of if this isn't working for parents. However, if we take this and apply it to educators and students or learners, it's very fitting. So all we have to change is what we're offering, which instead of food, we're offering learning, knowledge, skills. So as an educator, we decide what's going to be offered, when and where it's going to be offered, and then the student decides how much they're going to learn and whether or not they're going to learn. And I know when I was a new faculty member and I had students in my class that honestly chose not to learn and they didn't care. I was like so stressed by it. How could they not want to learn? Because it was something that I was really excited and passionate about. But we have to trust the process, right? Some students are going to choose not to learn and others are. But when we're trying to help students understand their role in learning, it can be helpful to show them something like this, where we have a role as educators and they have a role as students. And this is kind of like a mentor-apprenticeship relationship. They came here for access and opportunities, and we're willing to give them those access and opportunities, but they still have to do their part. And I like how Ellen Satter says that when parents are doing this division of responsibility, they should do it in a supportive and pleasant fashion. And so I think as educators, we should too. And if we feel like students are struggling when we're doing this role, we have academic resources on campus that we can refer them to. We definitely should monitor and assess how it's going. And if they're struggling, maybe they need to be referred to those academic resources, or we can look at our part and see maybe there's something that we're not offering in the right way that we could adjust as well. So the way that we talk about education and learning really matters. And Matt Sanders says that we should refer to students not as students, that we should refer to them as learners. And it's hard to take that mindset and change it if you have the habit of always calling your students students. But we can show them a table like this. This comes right out of the book. And he shows us the difference between the attitudes and behaviors of students versus learners. So this would be a great resource on the first day of class to say, I see you as learners. And this is how learners behave versus students. Students wait to be directed. They learn just for the test so that it's done, it's over, and they forget that information, right? They're externally motivated. They avoid challenging situations. They see learning as an obligation, just a checklist, and they're not getting much from it, and they learn just to do something. Whereas learners are really seeking out those opportunities. They're learning for understanding so that they can apply it to those real-world settings. They're internally motivated. They seek challenging situations, again, so they can get that depth of understanding. They see learning as an opportunity, and they're really learning to learn. They're trying to become something more. So we can definitely emphasize that as educators. Now, as the book continues on, Matt Sanders gives 7 different principles to help students to become learners. So we're going to move on and focus on building relationships, which is one of those principles.
Okay, let's think for a minute. Why do we care about relationships for our students? Think about, why do we want to be mindful of relationships students have with us or with their peers or with other professionals? So think for a minute, and I would love to hear thoughts that you have. Feel free to shout out if something comes to mind that you would like to share.
Well, the first thing that came to my mind is that quote that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, or something like that.
Yes, absolutely. So demonstrating that we care about them helps them value what we can teach them. Absolutely. Other thoughts? Yes.
It goes right to the keynote on belongingness and collaboration. To collaborate effectively, you need to have some kind of relationship.
Absolutely. Belongingness and collaboration, and that's going to be important whether it's, group projects that our students do together or, interactions that they have with other professionals. Yes?
Relationships build trust.
Absolutely. Relationships build trust, and that's going to create an environment where students can learn if they have that trust. Yes?
Just creating a team.
Yeah, the team, absolutely. Kind of breaks down the, we're the expert, we know everything, but we're on the team and can kind of share expertise. Yes?
Our students are people and have lives that also influence their learning and academic performance. We'll have that relationship to help us understand their learning experience.
Thank you very much for sharing that. That really ties in, that kind of building that understanding of our students and other things going on in their lives, and having that trust with us can help them feel more comfortable coming to us for help or getting accommodations or receiving feedback. Yes?
This is really similar to what you just said, meeting them where they're at, which is basically that, the way you build relationships is doing that, right, finding out where they are.
Meeting them where they're at. Thank you so much for these great thoughts. So have these in mind as we kind of continue on discussing some strategies. Was there a question in the back?
I was just going to add, so they don't feel lost. A lot of students come to campus and they're just one of many, and they feel like they should know what to do. And the relationship lets them know that they're not one of many, that they're a unique person who's having a unique experience.
Thank you for sharing that as well. So letting them know that we're aware of them and their unique situations, and tying back to what Stacy was sharing about kind of being a broker for campus resources when they do need that support. Thank you. So Stacy and I are going to take turns sharing some examples of strategies that we use in our classes to help build relationships. We're going to start first with the ones that focus on student relationships with professionals and with their classmates. So I teach senior dietetics students in some capstone courses, and so this type of course lends itself well to collaborations with professionals. So I'll just highlight a couple. So in my class, I invite campus dietitian Brooke Parker to come and guest speak about her experiences working with clients who have eating disorders. So they get that, kind of initial contact with a professional, which is great because as much as they love to learn from their professors, they also love some additional perspectives. But then we continue that collaboration, and the students and I and Brooke work together to plan a body positivity event at a local high school to kind of instill almost like a preventative measure for a population that may be at high risk for disordered eating. So one picture here, one of the activities that we did last year was a scale bashing event to really communicate that fixating on your weight is not always healthy or productive, and focusing on other attributes that we have. So this is actually a screenshot of a video of one of my students demonstrating the scale bashing, and this did get the most likes out of any post on our departmental social media site. Another example, the senior students also worked with other dietitians to do a research project, and ultimately they were able to share those results at a professional conference and to have it published in a peer-reviewed journal. So these types of collaborations help with the networking, kind of those in-depth communication type skills, and also it's a great opportunity for us to acknowledge students and their work, which also builds their confidence and their trust with us.
Okay, another way that students can build relationships is with each other, so with their peers. And as was mentioned in the presentation this morning, we know how much some students really love group projects and some of them really hate them and would just prefer to work by themselves. But it is important to be transparent about why we're doing group projects so that they have an understanding of the benefits to them. So in an article by Burke, and she published it in the Journal of Effective Teaching, she said, emphasizing that teamwork is really valued by employers, which we just saw in that other survey. So that's right off the bat, like when you're getting employed, this is a skill that they want to see. Also helping them understand that it inspires creativity. When you have more people, you have more ideas, more collective knowledge, and also less workload for everyone. So that's a benefit to the students as well. And then that they have a better understanding of themselves. They can assess how they are with their communication skills with their peers, and also how they work in a team and if they're dependable or not. So I have a group project in my class. It's where they develop a food blog post, and I have it scaffolded over 6 different assignments throughout the semester. But for the second assignment, I added this where they assign each other group roles. And so Burke in the same article said it's very helpful if you have them devise a plan of action. I don't call mine a plan of action, but essentially I have this assignment where I give my ideas of what different group roles could be. One could be a communicator, one could be the note taker, one could be, what else did I have on there? Taskmaster. I also list out a lot of what they would need to do throughout all those assignments, so they have a good idea of what needs to be done through the 6 scaffolded assignments. And then they have to assign each other a role, and they have to commit to what they're going to do as part of this group project, and then that's submitted to me. So now they're more accountable to each other, and they're also accountable to me because I know what they agreed to do. I will say before I added this, at the end of the semester when I'd get their feedback, many of them would say the work is falling on 1 or 2 people, and it was really hard to distribute the work, and this last semester I did this, and the feedback was much more positive. The work workload was distributed more evenly. They felt like it was less stressful because everyone knew what their responsibility was. So assigning a role can be very effective. The other thing, if we're really focusing on them becoming, is making sure that they're assessing how they are improving in their abilities to work in teams. So of course, I always have them evaluate their group members, so if there was an issue, they can let me know. But I also have them evaluate themselves as well, so that they can see how they are growing and becoming as they are trying to learn over the course of the semester. Another way that we can help our students build relationships is with faculty members. So we are often the ones that they ask for letters of a recommendation, and if they don't know us, then they won't have anyone to ask. But also, if we don't know them, when they ask us, it's really frustrating to write that letter, right? Because you don't know anything about them. You know their grade, and that might be it. So we can help them facilitate a relationship with us so that we know them and they know us. And so we're going to talk about a few ideas there. So one is, and I'm sure many of you do this, is just an introduction post in your classes. And whether my class is online or in person, I still have them do this on Canvas because it's written down for me. And I give them examples. They can do a video to introduce themselves. They can do a written introduction, and I do both for them so they can see how that's done, or they can just post a picture and provide information. So I give them a little tutorial on how to embed a picture because some students struggle with that. And so I make it very easy like that, and then I always, at the beginning of the semester, will print off the photo class roster, and then I put little notes of what they put in their introduction discussion around their pictures, so then when I'm in class and I'm calling on them, I have some reminders about them, so if there's something relevant to the class discussion, I can bring that into the discussion. I teach a class called Food Literacy, and it's a culinary course, and so we have these cooking labs. I do take pictures of their group. For some reason, when groups are clumped together, I can remember their names so much better. So if I'm like one person, oh, they're in that group, oh, that's their name. So you find your ways to help you remember their names, but knowing your students' names is a very great way for them to build that connection with you. And if they know you know who they are, they're going to be able to talk to you. So a way to kind of enhance that, at the end of my labs, I do this reflective activity where they have to plate their dish and then they present it to me, and it's kind of like a little cooking show where I sample it, give them feedback, and then each person in the group has to teach me something different that they learned that lab, whether it's, so they're reflecting and then elaborating it back to me. So I will call them by name individually. At the beginning of the semester, I have my cheat sheet so I know their names, but usually by week 2, if you do this every week, you have their names down. And so I'd be like, Sally, what did you learn? Beth, and I go each one. So every single week I'm calling them and looking at them in their face and saying their name, and then they're talking back to me. So by having this interaction individually with each student each week, and this wouldn't work in a big classroom, but in lab settings, that really helps you develop that connection with them, and they feel more comfortable to come and talk to you later on.
Do you ever share those getting to know, like the previous slide, those with the whole class, or those just between you and the student?
It's a discussion post so everyone sees them and they can, comment on each other. So great question.
All right, so we hope that encouraging students to come to our office hours would be enough to get them there, but you, like me, maybe sometimes have some quiet office hours. To kind of combat that and to try and build relationships with students, I've used different versions of a meet and greet type assignment. Often it's a required assignment for points. So this could look a few different ways. This might be more of just a get to know you. So they're required to come to my office, then they'll know where it is, and it's just a time for me to get to know them and to learn about their goals. That's helpful for me to, learn names and know who they are, but also if I become aware of volunteer or internship opportunities, I can share those with the students. Another way that it can be used is related to a project or an assignment. So perhaps before they start their final project, they're required to meet with me, share their ideas, get some feedback. So these types of assignments are great because they can break the ice, help students feel more comfortable. Often students who visit office hours early, even if it's just for the points, may be more likely to visit later, especially if they do need help or do need, some support or accommodations. And also can be helpful for communicating to them that questions are welcome, questions are part of the learning process. And for some students, especially if they're more reserved, having just a structured way for them to get their foot in the door can be a really helpful assignment. Another favorite assignment of mine, you may experience this, that students ask questions in class that you don't know the answers to. I have made it just part of the class that students complete a good question assignment. So these questions might come out organically during discussion. When they ask a question, I don't know the answer. I acknowledge that I don't know it, and then they complete the assignment by researching that out, sharing it with the class later, and also submitting a written summary of what they found. So this assignment is helpful in multiple ways. In one way, it shows that, I'm not perfect, I don't know everything, kind of builds that team environment that was mentioned before. It also helps, the saying goes, the one who does the work does the learning. And so students may be more likely to remember that answer to the question because they searched it out. And also, as my students have commented in their evaluations, that it helps with that trust, that they trust me when they know that I'm going to acknowledge if I don't know the answer to something.
Okay, so now we're going to turn the time over to you guys to do a little bit of work since this is a workshop. So the rest of the book kind of emphasizes seven principles to help the students become learners. And we discussed principle 4, learning requires a relationship. But we're going to give you guys time to discuss as groups these other 7 principles and discuss activities that you have done or you would like to do in your classes that would help students develop becoming a learner on these different principles. So we're going to have you input your information that you talk about into a Google slide. So if you follow that QR code or that teeny URL, it will take you to a Google Slides. And I think on a phone sometimes it does make you download Google Slides app, I'm not sure, but you can also pull it up on your laptop if you want to, or tablet. And then we'll give you about 5 minutes. We're going to have you get into groups of 4 or 5, or just like the people around you if you want. If you prefer to be an independent learner, you're welcome to think about it on your own as well. We won't force you to move. But we'll have you discuss for about 5 minutes, and then if you want, and I'm gonna, if everyone had a chance to get to that, I'm gonna move over to this other slide. Where did that go? So it looks like this. So you can assign, if you want to have a more effective group discussion, you can assign each other roles within your group. So someone can be the spokesperson, someone can be the note taker that puts your notes into these Google Slides that you want to share with the rest of the group. One of you can be the opinion seeker. One of you could be the devil's advocate. And if everyone's just agreeing on the same thing, just bring this alternative opinion over here and turn the conversation a little bit. But choose one of these principles, and I have them on the slide, and if you have one that you feel really passionate about, you can just click on there and just start typing something in so the other groups know that you're doing it. It's okay if multiple groups want to do the same principles. You can always copy the slide and start a new slide if someone's already typing on it. If you want to talk about a couple slides, you can. We put in some of the stuff that we already talked about with relationship, but I'm sure you have things in your classes that you could share with us as well. So, anything else? And then we'll come together as a group and discuss your ideas that you put on the slides.
I think just pull up the QR code again in case
Yes.
you grab that. But.
So, and then we'll start timing you and giving you about 5 to 7 minutes to get rolling here, and then we'll discuss as a group. Don't be afraid to stand up and move a little bit. You know you do this to your students. So
Okay, let's come back together. Thank you everyone for participating. Let's start with, is there any group that has like their favorite idea that they would love to share? or a moderately great. I know we've got a humble group. Maybe Principal 1, what would you like to share with us about how we can help students become learners in this way to focus less on the grading?
We talked about two ideas. One right at the end that we didn't have time to dive into as much, but one is like, one thing that we've done is get rid of exams or reduce the emphasis on exams and use project-based learning instead. And then we spent quite a bit of time talking about how the grading of projects can feel really arbitrary and how to use rubrics, specifically tying them to the most important learning objectives, to try to do that a little bit more subjectively, which I know that's a whole discussion about whether rubrics are really subjective, but that's what we were discussing. And then the thing that came up at the end was, even in an exam-based course, having the students practice self-reflection, what's working for them, what's not, as a way to help them improve resilience. Did I get that right, Stacy? Yeah. Which I really liked.
Great, thank you so much. I have to remind myself that for the recording, I'll summarize briefly, or maybe I'll be faster and bring the mic around. But great comments about how we use exams. If we're using them, can there be a self-reflection piece to build their resilience? Or would a project-based assessment be more appropriate, and having our rubrics help students feel like they're graded fairly?
Is the rubric, is the idea with the rubric that the students would see the rubric and say, this is what I need to do for this particular project or part of the project? Is that the idea with the rubric?
Can you share more info about the rubric?
I guess that'll have to be me. So the notion was, when I was trying to improve the objectivity of evaluating assignments and help the students know what benchmarks they needed to meet, I essentially scoured the internet and my colleagues for various rubrics, then pulled from those examples the elements that I quite liked, and made sure that they aligned and evaluated my objectives for that course and for that assignment. One of my goals in life is to not reinvent the wheel, and to use that collective knowledge of all of us as instructors here and around the world. And a lot of that content is out online. Google's your friend.
Thank you.
I can speak about
Okay.
ChatGPT will build some crazy good rubrics for you. You just have to spell out what you want on them. And you mentioned that you're not recreating the wheel, you're using everybody's using the artificial intelligence to build really good rubrics.
AI for rubrics. Thanks so much for sharing these examples of Principal 1. Let's see, Principal 2. Which group would like to share what you discussed about Principal 2? Or did AI write this one for us? Just kidding.
I've been nominated.
Okay. You can start, and I'll bring the microphone.
Okay.
So we talked about that we can help them realize that what we're teaching them is connected to other classes they've already taken. He teaches chemistry, and so he can relate it to other chemistry and other science classes that they've taken. Connect to real life examples, and then my typing was cut off, but pose questions and ask them where that knowledge came from. I teach financial literacy, so kind of very different, but I ask them to observe what's going on in their lives around them, and what they learn from watching other people and other situations.
Thank you. Great examples of helping them see all the connections, whether it's their own life or past or future classes or future careers. Let's see, maybe we'll just take one more example. How about Principal 3? Would anyone like to be the spokesperson for that discussion?
You guys are like real students.
I'll just speak for myself. I have a class that this way where they have to present something, and I let them do it however they want. And one of the jokes is always like interpretive dance, you know, they can even do it. And I did have a student do that. And I think everyone remembered that student and that presentation. And I think it was fun for them to get to feel more empowered.
The empowerment, absolutely. And I found also that if we are having, you know, kind of open-ended type learning experiences, for some students, that's so freeing to them. They can do whatever they want. And other students feel terrified because how's it going to be graded? How am I going to be sure that I get my points? So a couple just thoughts I'll throw out there is sometimes the rubric can really help reinforce that, help them feel safe to be empowered. Also, having maybe some extreme examples. So if they know that someone really did interpretive dance and they got full points for that assignment, that can help them. So sometimes we have to have supports for them to feel like they can take responsibility. I'm sorry that we're short on time and can't highlight all of these, but you're welcome to refer back to the PowerPoint that we've been building here and review more of those. We have just a few minutes left, and we'd love to answer questions if you have them. Or maybe we've just got the, you know, the wheels turning of how you may prepare your classes.
I will say one that happened in our group in Lansing.
Okay.
I brought up my concern about ChatGPT and how that's going to change some of my assignments. And then this lady, I know, everyone's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to call her, I don't know her name, brought up a great way. She flipped it and actually gives her students a ChatGPT created paper, and they have to look at it and find the incorrect information in there, because I think that's a great way to use it instead of losing that assignment.
Right, if they're going to use it anyways, is there a way that it can still meet your course objectives?
So I have a question for Stacy, kind of. So, and maybe you can answer too, but you talked about getting to know students' names, and the class I struggle the most with is I have a gen ed class, there's 150 students, and I want to know their names, and I feel like the first year I was here I did better, and it's got, COVID did not help, okay? Did not help. But do you have tips for like trying to learn people's names in like a bigger class? How big is your class?
Yeah, my biggest class is only 56 students, so I cannot attest to it. I think I would probably find it quite challenging to remember 100 students, especially if you're not interacting with them on a frequent basis. I do like print out those photo rosters for my 50 students, and I like quiz myself. I cover their names and quiz myself by looking at their pictures, and that helps a little bit. I think over the course of the semester, as you're grading and you see their names you start remembering their names, and if somehow you can connect their face with their names in Canvas, that helps a little bit. But large classes, I don't know, does anyone else have a good tip for that? Don't. Maybe every time they raise their hand, you make them say their names. They say their names, and then you repeat it back to them.
I'll just share one. I've kind of maxed out with the names at about 125. That's the largest one where I've really tried to do it. And like she said, with the photo rosters, I also have kind of like a notes section. So if they made a comment or they visited office hours, then I can just have additional notes as I quiz myself.
I do something similar. I don't have photos, and some of my students are broadcast, so there's such a little body that doesn't help. But I sometimes will do like always wears a hat, long brown hair, like some personal descriptors so that I can be like, okay, that's the one who always wears a hat. Okay, Erin.
I just have one other suggestion. I think too, when you grade, I always try to make an effort to like do like in the notes, or the comment section, I always save their name by name and leave a little comment. So I think that's another way. If you're not going to be interacting them in class online, you can be saying great job on this assignment and put their name, and so they know you're actually thinking about them specifically. It can be a little helpful.